And we're following the breaking news out of Afghanistan, where two explosions at the Kabul airport killed 11 Marines, a Navy medic, and dozens more overnight.
Washington Post reporter Tyler Pager is joining us now with more tonight. Tyler, we just heard from the president about half an hour ago. This is the worst attack on U.S. forces in Afghanistan in a decade. What is the assessment? ISIS-K has claimed responsibility. How did they make this happen?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of unknowns at this point about how the attack unfolded. But as you just mentioned, we heard from the president and he promised retribution, saying that he's instructed the military to develop plans to retaliate against ISIS-K at the time of their choosing, and said that, America will not forget, and those who were responsible for the attack will pay.
Tyler, the president also said that Afghanistan is an area that has never really been united, with different factions trying to take control. If you can, and if you know, can you kind of talk about the dynamics there? We're talking now about ISIS-K. That's a new name that we haven't heard. What it stands for what? ISIS-Khorasan, and they are sworn enemies of the Taliban. What about Al-Qaeda? What about the original ISIS that we heard about? What's going on there right now?
Yeah, so there's a lot of terrorist groups, and there's terrorist groups, and then there's these competing factions of bodies trying to govern. So the Taliban is now the de facto government of Afghanistan. This is who the United States ousted after September 11th from control. And Al-Qaeda was a terrorist group that was harbored in Afghanistan during Taliban control. So they're separate. ISIS-K is an expansion of ISIS, the group that we've known about for many years and have attacked, or inspired attacks around the world. And as you mentioned, ISIS-K and the Taliban are sworn enemies. So the United States is kind of caught in between a lot of different dynamics on the ground there in Afghanistan. Something that we heard today from the Defense Department was, in fact, that the Taliban and the U.S. military there in Kabul were coordinating, because the Taliban had an outer perimeter outside the airport where they were controlling who was getting in and out. And then inside that, the United States had its own perimeter controlling access to the airport. So a lot of different forces there at play, and complications obviously are arising today with the tragic death of U.S. service members.
So how does the U.S. navigate that in order to reach the deadline by August 31st to get everybody out of there?
Yeah, so we heard from the president and from military leaders that they will continue this operation. There is that deadline of August 31st in which they are planning to have all U.S. troops out of the country by then. But I think, one of the questions that remains is how many people are going to be left behind. The priority right now is getting out all Americans who want to leave the country. The State Department has been making contacts with those who remain to see whether or not they want to leave or want to stay. But then there are hundreds and thousands of other Afghans who want to leave, whether they are at-risk groups like women or people that helped the U.S. military over the 20-year period that there were forces there, the SIV applicants. So there's a large group there that it's unclear how many of them will be able to get out and how many will be left behind if, in fact, the American forces do leave on August 31st.
Yeah, because of what happened and the way it happened with potentially a woman, a suicide bomber, as that unfolded here, I mean, the likelihood of the United States leaving behind vulnerable allies, even though the president said that is not going to happen, it seems almost impossible to envision a scenario where people won't get left behind. Is that your view?
I think, the scope of the evacuation effort is immense. And so the United States has already evacuated more than 100,000 people. And I think what we don't know is where that list goes on from there. There are obviously more people gathered outside the airport desperately trying to get out of the country. And it's unquestionable that there will be people who want to leave that will not be able to for a variety of reasons. But how many and who those people are, I think it's difficult to tell.
It's been dreadful and hard to imagine this scenario. Tyler Pager with the Washington Post. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.